I used to think earning more money would eventually make me feel financially ahead. Walking through neighborhoods like this, I thought this was what success looked like. Big houses, newer cars, and quiet streets made the goal feel surprisingly simple. I just needed to earn enough to reach this version of life. Then my paycheck arrived, and for a moment, I felt like I was getting closer. But by the end of the month, most of that progress had quietly disappeared. Nothing dramatic happened. I simply kept paying for the life I was building. Coffee, groceries, fuel, housing, and small comforts all felt completely normal to me. So I started paying closer attention to what my ordinary day actually cost. One morning, I bought coffee before work without thinking twice about the price. At lunch, another small purchase disappeared quietly into the same familiar routine. After work, I filled my car and watched another payment leave my account. Later, I stood in a grocery aisle choosing things that had become normal. Every decision made sense alone, but together they were becoming surprisingly expensive. That night, I opened my finances and finally looked at the whole picture. My income was higher than before, yet I still felt strangely behind. That was when I noticed something I had never really questioned before. Maybe earning more wasn't the same thing as actually getting financially ahead. I thought I was finally getting ahead. So why did the finish line keep moving? When I imagined earning more, the first thing I pictured was a better apartment. Then I imagined replacing my old car with something newer and more comfortable. I could also eat somewhere better without checking the menu quite so carefully. Better technology seemed reasonable too, especially when my income finally gave me room. And with more money, traveling more often suddenly felt completely achievable. So when my income increased, upgrading my life felt like the obvious next step. The bigger apartment felt incredible, especially because I could finally afford it. For the first time, something expensive didn't feel financially out of reach. That feeling was powerful because earning more finally seemed to be changing my life. Then something strange happened. The upgrades stopped feeling like upgrades. After 1 year, I had almost nothing dramatic to show for the extra income. The apartment I once considered special had quietly become my normal. The newer car had also stopped feeling new. It simply became the car. Eating out had changed too, because convenience slowly became part of my routine. Even small conveniences began feeling less like luxuries and more like necessities. I wasn't making one huge financial mistake. My definition of normal was expanding. The more comfortable my life became, the more money it quietly required. That made me wonder whether higher income was actually creating more freedom. The more I earned, the more expensive my version of normal quietly became. After everything I learned, I started looking at prices differently. Instead of asking whether I could afford something, I asked what it required monthly. My car suddenly looked less like a purchase and more like a monthly commitment. The same thinking changed how I looked at my housing costs. Rent wasn't simply the price of having a place to live anymore. It was another payment that would return every month, whether I felt ready or not. Then I noticed how many other payments quietly followed the same pattern. Insurance continued, even during months when nothing unexpected happened. My phone bill arrived whether I remembered using the service or not. Subscriptions worked the same way, quietly returning to my account each month. Utilities kept running in the background, creating another layer of monthly responsibility. Even debt payments represented commitments created by decisions I had already made. None of these expenses were automatically bad. They were simply parts of modern life. The problem appeared when enough normal commitments began stacking on top of each other. One payment was manageable, but together they created something much harder to ignore. I realized these commitments didn't disappear simply because 1 month ended. They returned again, requiring another paycheck to keep everything running. That meant my paycheck wasn't only funding today's life anymore. It was also supporting commitments I had created yesterday. I wasn't just spending money anymore. I was building a life my paycheck had to maintain. After everything I learned, I started questioning what financial success actually looked like. The houses were impressive, but I couldn't tell what existed behind them. Then I noticed the expensive vehicles parked outside many of those homes. They looked like obvious signs that someone had made it financially. But an expensive vehicle could also represent a significant financial obligation. That made me wonder whether ownership alone could really tell me anything. I saw designer clothing, expensive technology, and polished restaurants everywhere. Everything looked successful, but appearances couldn't reveal the complete financial picture. A valuable home could still require substantial money every single month. A luxury car could provide comfort, while creating another long-term obligation. And a high income could support expensive living without creating real independence. I began separating what someone owned from what someone actually owed. Then I separated what someone earned from the freedom that income created. Those four things suddenly felt very different from each other. That changed the question I had been asking about wealth. Instead of asking how successful someone looked, I asked something much simpler. If the paycheck disappeared tomorrow, what would actually remain? That question made expensive possessions look completely different to me. I finally understood that looking wealthy and being financially secure weren't identical. Real security wasn't simply what I owned, earned, or displayed. It was freedom. After questioning wealth, I started looking at my own finances differently. I already knew what I earned, but I rarely noticed what remained. That remaining amount suddenly felt more important than the paycheck itself. So I started experimenting with creating a little more space each month. I wasn't trying to make my life miserable or eliminate everything enjoyable. I simply wanted to stop spending automatically whenever something felt convenient. One easy experiment was cooking at home instead of automatically eating somewhere else. The meal wasn't dramatically different, but the money left afterward was. I started questioning recurring expenses that had become invisible through repetition. Some expenses stayed because they genuinely mattered to the life I wanted. Others stayed simply because I had never stopped to question them. Slowly, I noticed something changing between my income and my lifestyle. The gap wasn't enormous, but for the first time, it existed. I began thinking of that space as financial breathing room. Income was the starting point, but margin was the room created afterward. And that room gave me something I hadn't considered before, another choice. Money I didn't consume today could potentially become more useful tomorrow. For the first time, earning more wasn't my only path forward. I could also create progress by widening the space between earning and spending. That gap wasn't wasted money. It was the beginning of financial freedom. I had finally created some financial space, but I still had a question. If I didn't spend that money, what was I supposed to do with it? Until then, leftover money had simply been money waiting for another purchase. Now I wanted that money to have a different destination. I started by learning what saving could actually accomplish over time. Saving didn't make me rich overnight, but it created something useful, resilience. Then I began learning why ownership could matter even more over longer periods. My paycheck came from my work, which meant my time remained closely connected to income. But ownership could represent something that existed beyond today's working hours. That distinction changed how I thought about the money I had left. Instead of automatically consuming every increase, I could direct some toward my future. A small amount could become the beginning of something larger over time. The idea reminded me of a snowball gaining size as it keeps moving. The important part wasn't finding one magical investment or guaranteed shortcut. It was repeatedly giving some of my financial margin a useful direction. For the first time, money wasn't only leaving my account to support consumption. Some of it was becoming ownership, resilience, and a longer-term financial foundation. I realized financial margin mattered because it gave me choices about tomorrow. I could save it, invest it, build ownership, or strengthen my financial resilience. The money left over had stopped being spare cash. It had become my future. I understood the numbers now, but something about spending still felt strangely tempting. I had created financial margin, which meant I could afford more if I wanted. Everywhere I looked, something seemed designed to make my current life feel outdated. My phone still worked perfectly, but newer models suddenly looked difficult to ignore. My car was reliable, yet newer cars around me made it feel older. Even restaurants started feeling like signals about the kind of life I should have. I began noticing how easily other people's choices became my own reference point. A treadmill surrounded by advertisements suddenly looked like a perfect picture of modern consumption. The faster I moved, the more messages seemed to tell me what I needed. I started wondering whether I was actually choosing upgrades or simply responding to expectations. Then I noticed friends making upgrades that seemed completely normal within our social circle. Nobody told me I needed more, but everything around me quietly suggested it. Suddenly, keeping my lifestyle unchanged started feeling strangely like falling behind. That feeling was dangerous because my financial plan hadn't actually failed. My conflict wasn't about needing something. It was about wanting to keep pace. I realized discipline didn't mean refusing everything expensive or enjoyable. It meant deciding whether each purchase genuinely improved my life. For the first time, I could separate wanting something from actually needing it. I didn't have to hate expensive things. I simply had to choose them intentionally. The trap wasn't only built from money. It was partly built from expectations. After everything I had learned, I started imagining success in a completely different way. I no longer pictured success as owning everything I wanted. I started picturing a life where ordinary financial problems felt less dangerous. An unexpected expense didn't need to become an emergency anymore. A difficult month could simply be difficult instead of financially destructive. Even changing jobs could become a decision instead of something I feared. That was when I realized money could create options, not just obligations. I didn't need enough money to stop working forever. I needed enough financial strength to make choices without constant fear. A purchase could become optional instead of something my paycheck had to support. My calendar could contain fewer financial pressures because fewer obligations controlled my decisions. I began to understand why financial independence wasn't really about escaping work. It was about reducing how much money controlled every decision I made. The difference was subtle, but I could feel it changing my thinking. I wasn't running toward a lifestyle that constantly demanded more income. I was gradually building a position where my income created choices. That made financial progress feel quieter, but somehow much more valuable. I could walk instead of run, because the direction mattered more than speed. My life hadn't transformed overnight, but my relationship with money had changed. Freedom wasn't having everything. It was needing less from every paycheck to feel secure. The next morning, my life looked almost exactly the same as before. I still had the same apartment, the same responsibilities, and the same routine. I still made coffee before work, just like I always had. Nothing about the morning suggested that I had discovered anything important. But the paycheck no longer looked like the entire story. I finally understood what higher income could actually accomplish for me. It could improve my life without requiring every increase to become another expense. The goal wasn't avoiding comfort, spending, or the ordinary life I enjoyed. The problem was letting an expanding lifestyle consume every future increase. I finally saw the progression clearly. Earn, create margin, protect that margin. Then build ownership, reduce dependence, and gradually increase the choices available. That wasn't a shortcut, and it definitely wasn't an overnight transformation. It was simply a different direction from the one I had followed before. I had spent years chasing a finish line that kept moving farther away. Now, for the first time, I stopped running toward it. I turned away from the treadmill and looked at the road ahead. The road wasn't about becoming richer simply for the sake of looking successful. It was about building a life that required less from every paycheck. I used to think escaping meant earning enough to afford a better life. Now I think freedom means needing less from your next paycheck to choose.